So now that our wall assembly is set up, we're ready to put the piece of chipboard that goes on the inside of this gate opening. And that's a piece of lightweight chipboard. We cut it 7/8 inch wide and 10 inches long, which is a little long. You want to make sure that you cut it so that its bendy direction is this way. First you want to just kind of put it in here and just make sure that that height is not too tall for the opening. It should fit just about correctly. It's alright if it's a tiny bit shorter, but you don't want it to be over. So if it's over, just cut that sliver off. Mine is just fine. And then I'm going to put this end right up against, flush with the end on the base on that side, and then curve it around, holding it tight here, and mark for length on this other side. And then I can trim that off with my craft knife. So now that I have my strip cut to length, I'll put some glue on the inside flat places here, and then a little bit of glue on the curved places here. Start it on one side and just glue it in all around. So I'm ready to install this. I put glue on the edges, some on the flat spots here and around the curve as well, and I'll just start it in on one side and put it all the way around. So now that we have that band installed, we can go ahead and wrap the back side. I'll just remove this score tape backing. And then in order to get it to wrap around the curved sides, when it stops being straight, I'll make a slit, and then I'll make a series of little slits here that are about 3/16 of an inch apart. Now, you may not be able to see, but you'll see on your own that actually right here at the top, this part is not attached. It doesn't go up tall enough, so I'm just cutting this little wedge off right here. And before I wrap this to the inside, I'm just taking a little bead of glue, about 1/4 of an inch up on the side there, just because sometimes with these small pieces, the score tape alone doesn't want to hold it. So once I put that glue in place, I'll go ahead and wrap. I gave everything a good burnish, and now on this part that's bare up here, I'm just going to take my black Copic marker and make sure I've got that covered. I'm sure trim will cover this up, but just in case, I want to make sure that none of the raw chipboard will show there. Now we're going to add some trim around the front opening here that will also wrap to the inside and make a clean finish on this gate opening. So I'm going to take a piece of white cardstock and cut a template, much like we did for the gate opening itself. I'm lining that up on my craft mat, and I'm going to make a vertical line aligned with one of the lines on my craft mat. Then I'm going to move over so that I have a 3 1/8 inch opening. 3 1/8. So this is 3 1/8. I'm going to turn it on its side, line up the bottom with a line on my craft mat, and measure up 2 1/4. So that was 2 1/4. Now we'll turn it back this way. You want to find the center point here. You can use your centering ruler and mark that, or else it is 1 9/16, so you should have 1 9/16 on either side of center, and go ahead and mark that point. Then take your compass and measure 1 9/16, which is a 1/16 more than a 1/2 inch. Make sure you have a good sharp point on your compass. and draw an arc using that center point. So here's our template, and again I'm going to cut out exactly on those lines. So here's my template, and if you hold it up onto the front, you'll see that you're going to have about 1/8 of an inch of trim, just a little bit more on either side, and also that this is about 1/8 of an inch taller than the cut opening of the paper. So that'll give us 1/8 of an inch border on all the sides here. So now on the back of my template I've put some temporary adhesive, and I'm going to use this paper to make my trim out of. You can use anything that you want, and I'm going to center it on these diamonds down here, and then I'm going to cut it off so that it's just a little bit taller than this. And then I'll put score tape all over the back here, and then cut out the shape directly on the line of our template. So here's my shape cut out. I took a black marker to the edges and also went around with a distress marker a little bit. And before I take the backing off, I'm just going to hold it off to my wall and see where I want that spacing to be. Now, because I've got this paper that has a pattern on it, it's easy to use that to help align where you want to put it. Now, if you think that you might forget where those are, I'm going to just use a small post-it on each side. I don't want to use a big one because I want to be able to see my dots. Hold that there. And now I know where I'm aiming for on my dots. So I'm going to release my tape backing. I'm actually going to put a piece up like this to begin with, just so it's not sticking prematurely while I'm working down here at the bottom. And go ahead and get each side on. Check to see if it looks straight. Then remove your top backing and go ahead and give that a good burnish. Now that we have that burnished, we can flip it over. We only need about 3/8 of an inch around here, just like we needed on the back side. This is just a piece of 3/8 inch score tape backing I had in my trash, so I'm just using that as a guide and putting that there, and then I'll cut around so that I'll leave 3/8 of an inch of that paper there so we can wrap. And now that I've cut out the excess, I can make my little slits and turn that to the inside. I'll make my first slit up about 2 1/4 inches and then go about every 3/16 inch around the rest. Now I've made all my little slits, and I'm just going to use my bone folder to kind of start to train this to want to go around that opening a little bit. Before I put it all the way down, I'll do like we did on the other side for these small pieces, and that is just to run a bead of glue about 1/4 of an inch in or so, just so those little pieces all have something extra to adhere to. This is a little, not flimsy, but you want to give some support on these side pieces when you go to press this down. And then I'll finish by burnishing on the inside, again pressing down on my work surface to make sure that everything is supported. I have my ends all burnished nicely in there, and then I'm just going to add just a tad of distress there on those edges. Then I think I'll add just a little bit here on the back as well. do these edges as long as I'm here. I'm going to put some trim on the bottom so it doesn't matter. And then to clean finish the inside of the opening, I've cut a strip, and this one is 13/16, so 1/16 less than 7/8. Just because I don't want it to hang over any. I'd rather have a little, I don't know if you can see this here, I'd rather have a little bit of a reveal on the two edges here than have it come over the edge. If you want it to come right to that edge and possibly over, you can cut this strip 7/8 of an inch. I backed it with score tape. I'm leaving it long. And when I put this in here, I'm going to take my time because it's easy to get a gap when you go around this curve unless you take your time. So just work at it a little bit at a time, keeping it straight and centered, and go around till you get to the other side. Just start even with one end. Have to kind of wrap it around a little bit here. So I've got it started on that end, and I'm just releasing a little score tape at a time as I go around. So if you don't have the caged bird die, you'll want to make a different piece for the gate, or else if you want to have something in the opening. And so the time to draw the shape is now before we put any trim on. So I'm just taking a piece of cardstock and putting that down, and then I can trace out that final shape of our opening. It's a little bit smaller, you know, now that we put that other piece in. And then I'll just mark that as the gate. Now if you have the caged bird die, you don't need to do this step. So that will be your template for the gate if you don't have that die. So now we're ready to finish the trimming on our front wall, and I've got the back side of it here to begin with. And to trim that, I've got a piece of green that's 3/8 of an inch wide, and I've just cut that from some of the 6x6 paper actually, so I had to cut two strips and join them together. And then this diamond pattern is actually one of the borders from this paper that has all the borders on it. So I've just attached that on there, and when we go to put this on, we're only going to hold it down a 1/2 inch from the top. And in fact, a 1/2 inch should bring this 3/8 inch strip just even with the top of our paper here. Now if your paper wasn't exactly straight or something, you can certainly bring it down just a hair to make sure you're covering up the edge of that paper there, but you won't want to bring it down too far so that you can encroach on the gate opening a little bit, but you don't want to encroach on it very much. So once you know your placement, then go ahead, I've got some score tape on the back of this, and go ahead and adhere that on your back. So on the front side, I'm going to use a base piece of 3/8 inch black cardstock, and then I'm going to use this trim that says like Prince Charming, Princess, I Believe in Fairies, etc. It's from the border sheet. And then in the center, I'm going to use a piece of chipboard from this Chipboard 2 collection. I've actually taken that piece and put it on a piece of, cut out a shape that's a 1/16 of an inch bigger around. I did mine out of lightweight chipboard. You could just do it out of black cardstock. And if you do it out of lightweight chipboard, just blacken around there so that it's nice and black looking. I just glued that up because what I want to do here is do a little fussy cutting and put I think I can get my words to fit in just where I want them. So I'll start out by putting my strip of black on with just some temporary adhesive. And remember, our placement is a 1/2 inch down, but if you have to bring it down a little bit more in order to cover the edge of the red polka dotty paper, you can cheat that measurement a little bit. And then I'll center my element here with some temporary adhesive, and I'm going to bring it so that maybe it's just a hair underneath that black cardstock, but it could come right to the edge of it as well. So now I have my element on with some temporary adhesive, and I can see where my words could fit. Now for one side, my knight in shining armor will fit very well. I'll probably just cut it off here, beginning with the P, and let it extend a little bit to go underneath the middle, even though it'll get covered up. And then on the other side, let's see. Well, Prince Charming and Princess is pretty good. You get a little bit of the eye there, but I think that would be all right. Or you could use my knight in shining armor again on the other side, or you could put Princess and I believe in fairies. Any of those I think would work. So what I'll do is wherever I'm going to cut it off, I'll make sure I'm going to extend into this middle a little bit. They don't have to meet. I don't have to use one continuous piece, but I want to have it go underneath the edge of the chipboard element a little bit. So here's my piece of trim. I decided to go with Prince Charming and Princess on this side and my knight in shining armor on this side. And then this is pine needles distress marker. And what I did was I cut off there's an R in front of, I forget what it says on the other side here. Oh, it's the R from armor. And I kept that R so that I could get this kind of centered, and then I just used my pine needles marker, kind of dabbed on that R, and also I think you can see down here that the I and the B from I believe is gone, and I just dabbed on there with this pine needles marker. Unless you get really close, you can't tell that at all. I also kind of did the same thing down here on the end of fairies, just in case that wants to sneak out. So now I'll have some nice words centered on either side of my decorative element. So I'll use my same 1/2 inch to measure down to put this in. You might be able to see I've got a little bit of black here, so I'll make sure that when I bring that down I get that covered up. So I'll put that in place with some score tape, and then I'll just use some wet glue to place this. So now I have that top trim installed, and the thing I want to do here is this is some of that little checked paper strips that we've been using around the bases of components and the roofs, and I'm just going to run that on either side of the gate opening, on both the front, and then here on the back I'll run it all the way up to that opening there. So as you can see, I've added my trim on the bottom to both the front and the back sides of the front wall, and I've also added a couple of decorative elements. These are from the border paper from the 12 by 12 line, and I just cut a couple of these stamps out, and then I backed them with some chipboard that I cut about a 1/16 of an inch wider around and just blackened the edges and behind. And then I have them basically centered on the sides and then up about 1.75 inches from the bottom. And I just put those on with wet glue in case I needed to move them around a little to get them positioned exactly right. So I'm not going to install the wall yet, just in case we need it to size our gate. Now we're ready to work on our gate. I have the piece of chipboard here. It's listed under the black under the front wall, and this is the gate piece. This is the caged bird die that I'm going to use. And then I've also cut a piece of pattern paper the same size as the chipboard, and a piece of black cardstock the same size as the chipboard. Now you'll notice that the die will cut a series of holes down here, and in the finished gate I don't want to see those holes. So I've got a little method I think that will work to cover up those holes. So this is what we're going to do. So I've prepped both pieces of paper with score tape on the back to begin with, and as I said, they're cut the exact size as this piece of chipboard over here. And what I want to do is cut a 7/8 inch strip off the bottom. And because these have score tape on the back, I'm going to use some of my low-tack tape to keep them in, hold that down so it won't slip when I cut this 7/8 inch section off the bottom. So I'll just line up my ruler and cut that. And then I'll repeat the same process for my black cardstock. Now for my pattern paper, I want to take a marker and just go on that bottom edge to get rid of that white showing. Bottom edge of this large piece and the top edge of this bottom piece, because we're going to eventually put these two pieces back together. And then I'm just going to set these two pieces aside for now. And then on the piece of chipboard, this is chipboard here, I'm going to line up both pieces of my paper on near the top so that that 7/8 gap is at the bottom. So I'll put the decorative paper on, then I'll flip it over and I'll align the black cardstock with the top as well. Now I've added my paper on both the front and the back, and I've burnished it well. And when I put this on the die, I want to line up the bottom edge of the chipboard with the bottom edge of the foam on the die. And then of course I'll just center it to make sure that I get the entire die cut. So this edge is lining up with the black foam on the bottom. And it's not cutting the entire top piece, but we're not going to use that, so it doesn't matter. And I'm just going to anchor that in place with a couple pieces of blue tape. And then I'll take that over to my die cutting machine and cut that. So here's my die cut. And I'm first going to flip it over and work on the black side. I'm just going to take this piece of reserved paper and butt it up exactly against that cut that we had and put that on there, and then I will use my craft knife from the other side and trim it off. And then on the front side, I'll take this piece of pattern paper and figure out where it matches up. And I can see where that one is going. This paper is so busy that I think that you won't be able to see this join. That's one of the reasons that I picked it. So I'm just going to remove the tape backing, make sure I get this lined up, and then flip it over and cut the edges even with the die cut. And once I've done that, I'm going to take my circle template with the 2.5 inch size, because what I really want to do is kind of curve this up off at the top, just so that it has a nice curve. You'll see here, I'm just kind of joining this side and this side in a curved line. So now I've trimmed off the top, and I'm going to just take a minute and go around with my marker and get rid of all of the white edges of the paper. And of course, if you used a piece of craft chipboard, you would need to darken all of the edges. So I'll do that, and then I'll be back. And then we need to trim a little bit off the bottom of the die cut, because if you try it in your front wall, even if you push it all the way up to the top, you can see that it hangs off the bottom here a little bit. So the way to do this is to first set your front wall so that it is lining up with a straight line on your grid mat, and then I'm also trying to get it centered there so I have a grid mark right in the center. And then I'm going to slide the gate in, and there's some play here, so you want to get the gate kind of centered left and right, and then look up inside here and bring the gate out a little bit until you see about the same amount of space up here at the top as you do on the two sides. It's about 1/8 of an inch. So just bring that out until you see that. Then you can take the building out of the way. And make sure you have the gate straight on a line here. There's a center part that you can put on a line. Then I want to cut it off 1/16 of an inch before that grid line. So this was the grid line that the edge of our wall was on. I'll line up my ruler, so I'm holding it back 1/16 of an inch from that grid line. Hopefully you can see that. Making sure I've got it there, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. So now I have my gate cut to the proper height, and we're ready to make the base. Now if you don't have the Tim Holtz caged bird die, we can use the outline that we made a little while ago of the gate opening shape to cut more of a door to go in the front there. So I've taken that shape that we drew, and I put it on my craft mat. I'm lining up this left line with one of the vertical lines on my mat and just making sure that it's straight there. And then what I want to do is measure in 1/8 of an inch from that line. And then I also want to measure in 1/8 of an inch on the right side as well. So you can make tick marks, or I'm just using the lines on my mat. So now I've drawn two lines that are 1/8 of an inch in from the original line. I'm going to turn it on its side and line up with the bottom of the cardstock with one of the lines on my mat, and draw a line that is 2 1/4 inches up from the bottom. Now I'll turn it back this way and mark a center point here. Now for me that's 1 1/4 inches. If yours is that, or you can measure it, and whatever it is, set your compass to that. Put your compass on that point, and then draw an arc. So now we've created a shape that's 1/8 of an inch inside of the original shape. There's one more thing we want to do, and that is to draw a line 1/16 of an inch up from the bottom. So I'm just using my ruler here. I've got my cardstock aligned on a line on my mat, and I'll draw a line 1/16 of an inch up from the bottom. So I'm going to cut out on all the interior lines and use that as a template to cut, well actually it's more of a door, I guess it's a solid gate, shape from the piece of gate chipboard that we have, and cover it with patterned paper on the front, and if you're not using black chipboard, put black cardstock on the back of it as well. And then you will be at the same point that we were with the caged bird die. Now we're ready to build the base for our gate or the door if you're using a solid piece of chipboard. And I just have here a scrap that, this scrap is about, oh, it looks like 1 5/8 by 3 1/2. But you just need something that's at least 1 inch wide, and the length needs to be at least the length of your cut piece of chipboard for the gate slash door. So I'm going to cut this to the same, I'm going to cut the length of this strip to be the same as my width of my gate slash door, and then I'll be back. Now I have my base cut to the right length, and I'm going to put a ledger strip directly on one edge and cut it even. Now I do happen to have a black one, so I'll use that, but just to show you what I mean, this is a regular chipboard one. And if all you have is chipboard, you can use that. You might want to use your marker and darken the edges first. So I'll go ahead and install that. So here I just used a piece of the craft just so you can see better. And now I'm going to hold up my gate right next to it, and then I'm going to use another piece of ledger strip and push that so that it's tight against that gate and the gate is standing vertically. Put that down. You can take the gate out. I'm just trimming these with my scissors. So then we'll want to cut this even with that second piece of ledger strip. And here, if I was using craft, I would just go ahead and blacken these edges, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So now here's my little base unit. I'm going to run some glue along each side. And I'm going to make sure I get the gate thoroughly seated in there and that it's standing straight, and then I'll allow that to dry. Now it may be that we'll want to put another ledger strip on the front and back, but first we'll let it dry thoroughly and see how sturdy it seems to be. So I'll just let it dry standing in the upright position. So my gate is thoroughly set up, and I don't think it needs another ledger strip here. It seems to be very sturdy, so I'm going to move forward. And I've cut a strip of green. This is from a sheet from the 6x6 pad. It has some little four-leafed kinds of things in there. And I've cut it 1/4 inch wide, put some score tape on the back side, and lined it with black marker on both edges. I'm just going to put this down right on the top of both sides. And then to finish this off, I'm going to add some trim. I think I'll add a piece right at the base of the gate. And I'll get that centered in there. I'll do that on both sides. So I've added that little piece of trim on both sides, and I just wanted to say that to burnish that, I just put the edge up on the edge of my ink pad here so that I can have some support, and that way I don't always remember to say to burnish everything, but that pretty much I think goes without saying, to make sure you burnish everything down. And then finally I'm going to take probably take a couple pieces and wrap this bottom edge. I think I'll put a little bit of glue on there as well, just for some added insurance. So here's the completed gate, and it fits easily. I think you can see here in and out, so you can take it out to see all the things going on inside of the courtyard. Now we're ready to glue in the front wall and our front right column, and we'll just do one more little dry fit here and check all around to make sure that everything is fitting properly, and it looks like it is. So I'm going to put the tower in last. So here we'll put glue on the front of the two pedestals, and then we can put glue on the bottoms, of course, here, and then a little glue on these two edges of this part of the wall there. Hold it right side up. These two, the two edges that go into this tower on the left. So I'll go ahead and put that glue on and get that in place. And then now that the front wall has been attached, I can glue in the right tower here. I'll put some glue on the edges that it will touch, and of course put some glue on the bottom of the tower. Make sure that my seam is coming into the center back here, and that it's plumb.